This month on my Patreon courses, I will be taking a different approach. As all of my courses are meant to be educational and for anybody to be able to learn a variety of different skill sets on how they can communicate as well as protect themselves from all sorts of things that are out there that maybe our physical eyes may not always be able to see, this will be no exception. However, you may already notice the tone is going to be different. The tone is different because what I'm going to talk about is going to be scary. I am going to tell you some of the scariest things that have ever happened to me. I'm going to explain to you in more detail why it is I have made the decisions that I have made in regards to my boundaries, even with the physical. I am doing this because I take issue with anyone saying that they are jealous of me and jealous of my experience and jealous of my gifts. Remember, I do not believe these are gifts. I believe these are abilities that can be built and grown over time, and that is exactly what I've been doing. I tell you these stories not to scare you. I tell you these stories because I want you to learn from my experience and not have to have the same experience for yourself. I did not know anyone who could do the things that I could do. I did not know the psychic language when I was first coming into it. I've learned very much in a very short amount of time. And I want to share that with people so that you feel like you have community, so that you feel like you have something to learn and grow from rather than going into it blindly as I did. Stories I will be covering in this particular course: figures in the hallway, clown from my nightmares, a man in my closet. One of my youngest memories is when I was toddling around in my childhood home and I was having some issues with depth perception. I didn't fully understand what it was that was going on. I felt dizzy. I felt something strange in my gut. I remember looking out a window and then seeing this sort of energy go through the window, through the bathroom, towards me where I was in the hallway, knocked me over and went into my room. Physically knocked me over. The next thing I remember was I was staring at the ceiling. It was an energy. I didn't know what it was at the time. It was scary to me. Other things that happened in that house growing up was I would see shadow figures in my hallway. I would see them cross by at night. I didn't know what they were. I was very confused because my dad once told me that none of the random spirits from outside could get into the home because he believed in this sort of totem that they carried and that I would be safe. But what I was being told and what I was seeing were two very different things. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and seeing these figures that didn't seem to be human walking up and down my hallway, and I was terrified because I was so worried. What if they looked over and saw me? I didn't know what to do. I remember one night before the figures could come out, I went over to my mom and dad's bedroom and I said, "Mom, can I please shut the door at night?" And she allowed me to do so. I couldn't verbalize why it was that I wanted to shut my door. Not long after that, I started to manifest. I didn't know what it was. I was praying to this concept of God that I had been taught about, and I started to manifest, not being able to see what would scare me anymore. I wanted to live in this sort of blindness rather than see what I was seeing, rather than having to verbalize what it was I was seeing. That's when I started turning off my clairvoyance, my physical eye clairvoyance. Though here's the thing, my inner eye clairvoyance didn't go anywhere. I was always a highly imaginative child. I still am a highly imaginative person, and it's wild how imagination can blend into channeling so long as one is grounded and so long as you can work with your guides, with yourself, with others to verify the experiences that you are having. What were these figures? Shadow folks walking up and down the hallway. Maybe they were protective. I couldn't believe it at the time. I was afraid. I haven't really looked into it that much. Go figure, in time, I have talked to my sister, for example, and she has confirmed strange happenings that went on in the house, things that we never talked about when we were growing up. So it wasn't just me. Another experience that happened in that house was we actually caught a ghost on camera. It is a VHS. Go figure, after we caught that video, I actually videoed it, went frame for frame. I remember I was 1, I believe. I was right before I turned 1, so I was a baby. My mom was carrying me into the living room. It was Christmas morning. The sun had not come up yet, and my dad was behind the video camera. My sister runs in. We are the only 4 people in the house. My dad's kind of readjusting on the recliner, kind of moves the camera over to the side and then moves it back real fast. And when that happens, there's this kind of misty image that goes past the opening of the doorway in the kitchen. And then the same sort of thing happens again, because my sister, I believe, was like kind of running around at the time. And so he was kind of following her and then went back. And you see this little face just moving from the door frame. It's a little boy. He had glowing white eyes, black hair, kind of looked like a bowl cut. He was small. And then it just sort of faded out. I was the only one to recognize this maybe 10 years ago at this point. I pulled out my camera, I filmed what was going on, I went frame for frame, and I saw it with my sister and my mom, and we had no explanation for it. The figure was transparent, but there. And if you're wondering, where is that imagery? How interesting. Well, I had it on my camera for years, and then it disappeared. And on top of that, so did the VHS. That VHS has a year's worth of memories on it, and it's gone. I'm not entirely sure what that's about. All the same, could I find out? Yes. Do I want to? Not necessarily. It's not really something that I need to dig into. A lot of times people go into things and they want to know, what was that? Why was that? All of that. The point is, I got through it and I'm okay and I'm past it, and I had the validation that I needed to have at the time to know that my house was haunted growing up. Not only was that happening, my dad did not have the mental health assistance that they needed, and they turned to spirituality and invited a lot of things in that were not very good at all for any of us, including them. For very long, I was told that I was special, that I likely had sight, and I shut it down because I was afraid of the things that were getting into my home. And I had 2 very different parents. One Southern Baptist at the time, the other one kind of dabbling in Wicca. And I went away from Wicca because whatever was going on there was something that scared me and something that I didn't understand and something that I didn't want. So I went hardcore into Christianity at the time. This, of course, is nothing bad against Wicca. This is a story of mental health, of checking oneself, and of holding responsibility for what one brings into their house, and the understanding that a single totem may not be enough to protect an entire household. At least that's what it was in this case. Other things that happened in that home, a video of mine went viral a few years ago where I talked about a clown lamp, and a lot of people got a really interesting vibe, very validating vibes from it. I am not afraid of clowns. I have no phobias of clowns or anything like that. I have even taken clown classes when I was in college. This clown was created by hand, given to my sister, and then given to me. This clown had a feeling about it. And if you see the lamp, it's super cute. Like, there's no reason why something like that would give me nightmares. And this is when I started to shut off my ability to remember my dreams. This clown, I would have these dreams of this clown throwing off the shade and jumping down from the shelves, climbing up on my bed, holding up its balloons, because it had these balloons, and putting them into my head. This was incessant. I can't explain it. How does a 4-year-old develop fears like this? Where do they come from, if not from somewhere? And so every night for 6 months, I prayed to the creator beyond, and I said, I don't want to remember my dreams anymore. After a while, I didn't. These are things that I actively did, though not everybody has to actively do them consciously. They can do it subconsciously. And you know what? For the time, it gave me a kind of survival. It gave me a kind of peace. My shielding, my self-made blocks let me sleep. And that was more important at the time than sight. I didn't understand what I was doing. I did not feel empowered to do anything about it. I did not feel safe to communicate it to anyone who might believe me at the time. And so I did what I had to do. Next up was a man in my closet. All this is in the same house, all the same room. This man, I would wake up sometimes at night, and even though I couldn't see him with my physical eyes, it was like I could see him up here with my inner eye clairvoyance, which I didn't know what that was at the time. I just knew. It was a combination between sight and claircognizance, the knowing, where I would see him come through the closet and stand and watch me angrily. I had no idea why this guy would do this. And I didn't tell anyone about it because I didn't know how to describe what in the world I was seeing. Who says that a man is in their closet and that they keep coming through every so often and they just seem angry? I remember he was wearing this overcoat, like a brown suit. It struck me from the 90s, which was interesting because I started to see him in the late 90s into the early 2000s. And that's how long I lived in that house. I lived in that house up until the 2010s. And after that, I moved out, and I won't say exactly who moved in because I want to be respectful of boundaries there, though a young child who I knew, they were renting the home from my mom, a young child who stayed in the room that I used to live in, started to have problems with a man in the closet. I felt very validated. Here's the thing. What I appreciate about the situation was this little girl was seeing this man in the closet, was seeing him come out of the closet and didn't like him. She told her dad. And even though her dad, from my understanding, didn't entirely believe in ghosts and a man that could potentially be in her closet, what I love that he did was he talked to her about it. He listened to her about it. And then he even went over to the closet and he's like, oh, is he in this closet? And she was like, yeah, he's in the closet. He went over and he was just like, all right. He like raised his fist and he was like, you come out of this closet one more time. You mess with my daughter one more time and you're going to have to mess with me. It didn't take much, but go figure. From my understanding, it worked. I never heard about that man again. It is important that even if we don't always believe everything that kids tell us, to at least let them feel heard, to let them feel safe, to stand up for them when they are afraid. It goes a long way. And this is something that I have had to deconstruct for myself when I have looked back into my memories, when I've had to look back into where my psychic shields and blocks came from in the first place. It's like emotional time travel where I go back to these times and I stand next to child me and I say, what do you need? Child me needed the door to be shut. Child me needed the lamp to be removed. Child me needed somebody to get that guy out of the closet. They're very simple things that can be done. I regularly have consultations with parents who are like, what do I do for my kids? Support them. Listen to them. You don't have to believe everything they say. What's most important is that they believe that you're going to protect them no matter what. That's something I had to go back and do for myself. Emotional time travel. I see it in my mind's eye. I go and I do what I need to do. Though for this next generation, those of us who are even generally aware of these things, even if we don't always understand them, we can do things for kids so that they don't have to be afraid moving forward. Because by the way, this next generation, they're going to be seers. They're going to have experiences. They're going to understand far more than we can conceptualize right now. Kids are getting smarter. They're getting more intuitive. It's our time to support them so that they can be a better change, a change that we would have wanted when we were younger and we didn't get for whatever reason. This by no means is a criticism on my parents. My issues with my childhood growing up were far more about things going on in the physical regarding mental health than they ever were in spiritual health. I regularly talk about how mental health and spiritual health are intertwined. This is one of those examples. A gargoyle that was connected to an ex of mine, a screaming woman that was connected to another ex of mine, a violent energy that was seen in a previous workplace of mine, my experiences with sleep paralysis, figures that were seen not only by myself, but by my pets all at the same time, being followed home multiple times. George. Did anybody forget about George? It was entertaining, wasn't it? I wanted it to be entertaining so that you could learn. It was not entertaining at the time. And the things I have not put on my TikTok, I watched an ex-friend of mine get possessed for 6 hours. I then went to her house to try and help. Some things it's up to the individual to fix for themselves. I will not be posting most of these publicly. I may post some of them on my YouTube. Otherwise, they will be on the courses. The reason why I do this is some people are not going to believe this. That is fine. I am not doing this as a, you have to believe me. I have not done anything on my channel as some kind of, you have to believe me, I'm trying to prove myself. No. Everything on my channel is for those who ask questions, those who are curious, those who want to feel seen, those who may have never had an experience in their life, but may find entertainment in this so that perhaps if they do have an experience, they might look back at that video that they watched from me and not be so afraid. That is why I'm doing this. If you want to watch this, you don't have to sign up for a long-term subscription, though it is going to be in full on my Patreon as well as with all my other courses.